So in my video this week, I'm going back to the chassis and focusing on trying to get that chassis welded out. Basically, I like to mix it up. I don't just fully TIG weld or fully MIG weld. I like to kind of use both in different situations. There's some areas that are difficult to get to with the TIG, and it's just easier just to hit it with the MIG real quick. And so one thing I do is, not a lot of people see the bottom of the chassis that much. I know it's kind of cheating a little bit, but I kind of MIG weld the bottom parts of the chassis and then start TIG welding my way up. It really takes a long time to kind of TIG weld something like this out. So basically I had to do this over the course of a few different days and through a few different tanks of welding gas as well. So it's rewarding once it's done, and I'm going to get most of it done here, and I will be able to then put it back on the table, put the motor and transmission back into it, and kind of have it set in there for mock-up so that I can get the axles back under it and then start working on the links. I need to build the axle links and kind of get it all linked up, and hopefully my shocks will come in one of these days. All right, so what I've been doing, I started welding this thing up. For the base, I MIG welded and kind of MIG welded down in the base where it's not as visible in some of the harder to reach spots. Then what I'm going to do is take my time and go around and TIG weld everything else. So all the top area is going to be TIG welded, and I kind of took the easy route and used the MIG for the bottom. TIG just leaves such a nicer looking little weld, and it's just so much more precise than the MIG. You don't have all the splatter and everything, and it's just a nicer looking little weld. And it's fun to do once you get going into it, but it's a lot more time consuming. It takes a long time. So anyway, it's fun. I'm not in any hurry. So that's what I'm going to do, is keep working my way around everything, and then I just keep rolling the chassis over so I can always weld flat. My goal is I like to have somewhere to set my arm, and when you're trying to weld up sideways and go like that, it's always a lot more difficult. So the goal is to try and make it as easy as I can on myself. That way my welds will come out nicer and just be easier on myself. So that's the goal. So one more thing I just kind of wanted to go over. What are my goals for this chassis? What am I trying to achieve here? So I just kind of wanted to just cover that real quick in case I haven't been clear throughout this process. My goal is to keep it as small as I can so that I can fit in there. I'm not a small person, over 6 foot. 6'1" or so, and so I'm not the smallest person, but I need to make it as small as I can fit in there. But some of the other goals were to try and use as small of motor as I could in this project without getting like too crazy and getting too exotic and having to spend too much. I would say just more economical. My goal was just to go for a more like economical small motor, so that's why I use this little V6 there. You can find them anywhere, these Vortec V6. They're easy to work on, they're readily available. They're not the narrowest motor, they're just as wide as a V8. However, they're basically, a lot of the internal parts are the same as a V8. They're just 2 cylinders shorter. So it's a shorter motor. It's not as long, unlike my V8 and my other rock crawler that gives you more space to put things up in front of it. Also being smaller, it uses less fuel. Also being smaller, it should create less heat, so you can get away with a smaller radiator. Those kind of couple things are what led me to like a smaller V6 type motor. Another thing is not as much horsepower as a V8, so it's a little easier on parts. You're less likely to tear up axle shafts and U-joints and stuff as easy because it just doesn't have all that extra power. So my goal was to get a small little V6, or I was looking for even an Ecotec. Those would be a nice motor because they're like long and or they're not long, but they're skinny and kind of tall, and they're easier to package in something like this, but I couldn't find anything locally. And I came across this Vortec. Living in Western Colorado, you don't have as many options as, say, the Front Range for auto parts. So anyway, that's why I found this. I'm using what I can find, what's available. And so that's the goal with some of this and what I was trying to achieve. So that's why I used that V6 with that 4L60 transmission. And on top of that transmission too, there's definitely, once again, lighter, smaller motor transmission combinations, but with that 4L60 it directly bolts to that Vortec V6. A Turbo 400 or a Turbo 300 would be pretty easy to adapt to, but I figured I'd try a 4L60 this time because it already has the wire harness and everything for it, so I just thought it would be the easiest to adapt over. When comparing that to size to my Turbo 400, the size wasn't all that much different. It could be a little bit heavier, but not terribly much more than a Turbo 400. I have a Jeep RH32 sitting over there, which is also the same as a TorqueFlite 999 sitting over in the corner. I thought about maybe using that because it's a pretty small transmission. And all these people are using these Jeep 904 transmissions these days because they're really small. But by the time I would have put an adapter, it would have cost me like $1,000 in adapters and everything. And by the time you do that, I've still, for that TorqueFlite 999, or RH32 I should say, I still would have only saved 2 inches in total length. So sometimes it's just a compromise on how much are you willing to spend to shave off that much. So in this case, it's not a competition car, so every little inch isn't that important, but I just wanted to try and keep it small. So the chassis is it's just over 48 inches wide. It's like 48.5 inches wide outside to outside of the tube. So it's just over that. So it's a little bit narrower. My other one's just under 50 inches, which is still pretty narrow. Trying to keep it narrow, keep it small. And this chassis is 5 inches shorter than my other one. And it's going to be a chore to try and package everything in there because my other one's pretty tight as it is. So I'm gonna definitely have to wear a helmet in this one because I'm not going to have that much extra headroom at all. So I'm trying to keep it small, trying to keep it low. I want it to sit low and stable. The belly height's about where I expect it to be, around 18 inches, kind of what I was shooting for. And that's what I made this little table at, so I can kind of get an idea where it's going to sit. And then for the skid plates, I was going to do AR plate. I was going to do a video on that. And then I'm also going to do a video on making like an aluminum roof, putting the aluminum roof and all the tabs on there. And then also a video on all the side panels, and it'll come out with a similar look as my other rock crawler, not as many panels, but I'm still going to do aluminum panels with quarter turn fasteners all the way around. Mainly just the sides and then back and the roof. And then a small hood, a very like small hood for maximum visibility. That's my goal for this. It's going to be small, short, narrow. It's just going to try and keep it as small as I can with this, and just try and use a common readily available motor. And that's kind of the same thing with the axles. These are all common readily available axles. That's what I'm going for. That's my goals. That's what I'm trying to achieve. So it's going to be a pretty basic crawler with should have nice sharp steering. If I do everything right, I should be able to get both the front and the rear axle turning pretty sharp for about as economically as you can do it. All right, so this is pretty much what it's going to look like with me inside of it. My seat will be a little bit lower than this. This is sitting just a hair high. I just was trying to adjust this plastic seat. It's not in the perfect spot, but it'll give me about 4 or 5 inches over my head, which isn't a lot. And it's definitely will be wearing a helmet in this thing, which I should wear a helmet in my other one anyway. I don't know, I don't. But anyway, the steering wheel right here, the gas and brake are going to be kind of tight in here between the exhaust headers and such, but I'll kind of have a little firewall right there, but my other one's tight too. So I can actually, I'm going to use a little bit smaller seats, PRP style, like I have my other one, the real small one, so I'll have a little bit more room. But yeah, it's going to be tight. There's not going to be a whole lot of extra room, a whole lot of extra stuff in here. It's going to be like the bare minimum. But I think it's going to work all right. Should have good visibility all the way around. I'm just going to put one square panel for the hood because I like to see the tires and everything. I want to see the tire right there. I want to just be able to. That's why I take the panels off my other rock crawler quite a bit, because I like seeing that passenger tire. And I take out some of those side panels so I can see all of that. It makes a big difference in technical trails. Like just being able to see right there. There's nothing worse than sitting there having to ask somebody like, what's that tire doing? Is it starting to climb? You know, that sort of thing. It's nice to just be able to look at it and say, oh. And then the same with looking out the back. I'm not used to rear steer. I haven't had a rear steer buggy before, so there's going to be some getting used to with that. I know after a while you can get used to it and kind of know it by feel, but being new to it, I want to be able to turn my head all around and see what those tires are doing. So I'm hoping for I'm going to make it for good visibility all the way around, because that's really important to me. Keeping it small as I can. Keeping it kind of just basic as I can. I don't like having a whole lot of extra stuff. And just keeping it small and basic, and looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm getting excited because it's moving along. It's starting to look like something, and I just got to keep chipping away. These are big projects, and they take a long time. It takes a long time to build something completely from scratch all the way through. It's just I don't look at it as one big project. I look at it as a series of little projects, and that's why I'm doing this video series that way, because it's a series of little projects. That's all this is just keep biting off one piece at a time and just keep trying to complete little projects as we can go with what we have. So it'll really start looking like something when I get an aluminum roof on it and I get some side panels and stuff. And that'll be shortly. I'll get right after King of the Hammers, I will get started on getting the links in place, getting the suspension linked up, and then get some aluminum to get a roof on there, and maybe some AR plate for the skid plates, and also some aluminum for the sides. I've got the tabs and everything already. Start figuring out where to put some of these other things, the steering, the radiator, the fuel cell, all that kind of stuff, and just gonna keep chipping away, doing what I can do with what I got.